What is this guy working on now? Well, hey, hi. I'm Jalen Johnston. Got a couple things to show you. It's been a fun week. So I happened to be the winner of the race for the first come, first serve right to purchase a bulk lot of instruments over the weekend, which was great. It wasn't a very bulky bulk lot, but there were 2 guitars and a bass involved, and also a bass amp. And this was a family who was moving out of their apartment. They had a bunch of instruments that they had hoped their kids were going to pick up on, and the kids just never did, and they didn't want to move the stuff. So I took a very early morning drive to make sure I was the first person on their doorstep to give them a very small amount of money. It was their asking price, and I was happy to swoop it up. But a lot of the stuff, actually all but the bass amp, needed a good bit of work because they'd been tossed around in kids' playroom the whole life. So one of the things in the whole set of stuff was a very cheap acoustic guitar that I didn't get any footage of, mainly because it wasn't all that interesting to me. It was just a super cheapie. I believe they sell for $99 brand new on Amazon, like exclusively. It's the only place you can find them. It's just some random Amazon seller that imports these super cheapos. But I did what I could to clean that up, adjusted the truss rod, and cleaned off the fretboard and stuff. Had a little bit of damage, had a little bit of finish marring. So I wound up just selling that one for $40, like as quickly as I could get rid of it, I did. So that one's already gone. There was also kind of a nice bass amp, actually in practically new condition. The Fender Rumble 25. So that one I actually sold to a fantastic dude yesterday. And that leaves these two. This is a Dean Edge bass. When it came to me, the nut was actually broken. This little tab here next to the low E string was broken off, and the previous owner had tried to hot glue it back in place, bless his heart. So I did order a synthetic bone nut replacement. The only bummer is it's the only thing on the whole base that isn't black, but the synthetic bone will sound better than the black plastic, and the black plastic that was original was clearly not all that durable anyways. So did wind up getting those, had to file down the nut slots there, which was a bit of a task because I don't have the specialized tools, but I'll show you how I did it. So the actual specialty tools are pretty expensive to get anything of decent quality. StewMac sells a set, Music Nomad sells a set. These are specific nut slot files, which always makes me feel a bit like a 12-year-old. But you never outgrow it, guys. My nut slots. So anyways, the real deal is a couple $100 for a set because they're sized specifically to follow the size of the string that you want to slide through that guy. So I wasn't about to spend a couple $100 on rarely used tools for the sake of an instrument, a bass that I barely paid any money for. So here's what I did. I have had this set of files, just kind of generic, cheap and cheesy Amazon set. And it has a lot of these little guys, little kind of slot files in here. Thankfully, got to do the beauty influencer thing, act like I'm showing you my lipstick, get it focused. There you go. Thankfully, bass strings are much thicker, which means they're a lot more forgiving if you get a little bit approximate, right? So the way this came, I'll show you. It came in a 3-pack. There's the other 2 that I didn't use. As you can see, they're kind of slotted almost just as a guide, but those slots are not deep enough to allow the actual string to behave the way you really want it to. So those are more just like almost as reference for you to file down yourself. So there's the 38 millimeter. You can see, of course, my nerdy ass labeled it on the bag there, and that's the width of the nut slot itself, or the nut width would be 38 millimeters. It's actually a little bit shallower, a little bit smaller than 38 millimeters, so I had to sand down the edges there. But you know, again, cheap and cheesy, keeping in the spirit of the instrument itself. I believe this 3-pack was $10 on Amazon, so I got to work on the one that I installed. So like I said, a couple of things to address. One is the actual width right there. This is a very acrobatic filming angle. You're welcome. So just shy of 38 millimeters, sanded down the sides there. Then you have to worry about the height, so that the strings are the correct distance off the fretboard, so that they're not so high up that when you push them down to fret them, you're actually pulling the string sharp. So that's another reason to worry about the height. Wound up sanding down the bottom of that nut so that it would be the correct height. And then the depth of the channels that the strings actually travel through. And the general rule there is you want about 2/3 of the string itself to be seated down in that channel, so that it doesn't go flopping around, or if you get all enthusiastic, it doesn't pop out of the... So I noticed a few things about my file set here. One is that this width, let's focus buddies, is, you know, pretty close to the width of that low E string. So I was able to use this little file. There you go, there's some free feet. Able to use this little file for the main low E, and then you can see it's tapered. So I just kind of filed shallower for the others, coming on this way, all the way down to this little high G string, which wound up almost being like pencil work, just channeling it down that way. There's another file, this little guy, that has a little bit more of a blade shape that I was able to do some shaping with as well. My first time trying any of this stuff, so thankfully all the tools and all the parts were pretty cheap, just in case I screwed up. And I didn't. So as you can see there, it's just about 2/3 of the way, you know, down into that little channel on the low E. Similar for the rest of the strings there. Got that about right. I left it a little bit higher than probably the ideal specs would be. And the reason I did that, this bass is metal. So, I mean, it kind of is. It's pretty much a, you know, a matte black metal oriented instrument. So I'm assuming that whoever winds up with this is going to want to maybe downtune a little bit, and downtuning the strings creates more slack in them, which means they flop around a little bit more. So giving a little bit higher nut height and higher action allows downtuning to be cool without like a whole bunch of slack slapping around, where everything winds up sounding like a Korn album. You little freaks on leashes. So yeah, that was actually the main project with this one, with this little fixer-upper. You can see the truss rod cover is missing. Not really worth replacing that for the price point that I'm trying to unload this thing at. You can also, well, maybe you can tell this string's a little bit brighter. That's because the previous owner had barely wrapped any of the strings around the posts. Common problem if you're not, you know, a total guitar dork, not to give yourself enough wrap around the posts. So when I was messing with the low E and like going strings on, strings off in order to mess with this nut, the low E string wound up just breaking from too much like repeated stress. So thankfully, you know, I got extra strings, so they got a free low E bass string replacement there as well. And then from there, it's just intonation, all of that fun stuff. I did adjust the truss rod a little bit so that the neck relief, that whole bowing of the wooden neck, was set correctly. The string length intonation adjusted down here using these little guys, these little screws, and then the height off of the deck here, utilizing these little set screws as well. So it's playing great. It actually sounds fantastic, especially for such an inexpensive bass to begin with that I got for even more inexpensively, even less expensively. I prefer the double negative. More inexpensively. More would be a positive. More. Pretty simple bass. One dual coil pickup, one volume, one tone. So I did pop the back cover off there and cleaned out the pots so they aren't doing the scratchies. But speaking of scratchies, again, this is a bass that's been played. It's been lived in and loved on and rocked hard. So hopefully somebody will give me about $100, maybe 120, to continue this thing's rocking life. Now, what I will say with this, this project, this whole nut swap project, took a long time. So what I saved in in dollars by not buying the specialty tools, I definitely paid for in time. Just like using that little pencil tip to try and carve down this tiny little channel for the high G string there. I probably spent 2 hours just making sure I didn't screw this thing up. But I saved $200 on the specialty tools, and the thing's playing great. And now I've got 2 extra nuts. So anyway, does that make this a nut sack? One last thing on this one. These nuts actually don't need to be glued, which is a fantastic sentence. But you can. I mean, generally the string tension is enough to, you can see they kind of have that breakover angle. That's enough tension to hold them in place. But since this one is just kind of stuck at the end of a fingerboard, budget decision in the construction of this bass, instead of it being set into a carved channel where it has support on both sides, it just has the one spot where it butts up against the fingerboard and then the bottom itself. I did put a couple of dabs of tight bond glue, one there to keep it in place for whoever has to change the strings next time. So that was about the end of that. All right, I've rambled for too long and I need to touch grass, so I'll tell you about the other one tomorrow.